Let's get to know the Philadelphia Eagles 2024 version a little bit better with the man who knows them the best, Gino Cammilleri, the host of Locked On Eagles. Where is this team right now? Where are they going this season? And how about that division? Are they still on top? All that and more come up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson. As always, thanks everybody out there for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We love our everydayers, and we especially love it when you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. And we've also got a very special guest, Mr. Gino Cammilleri, co-host of Locked On Eagles, joining us today to break down everything going on with the Philadelphia Eagles. Today's episode of P&W is sponsored by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Gino, how are you, sir? It's been an eventful offseason for the Philadelphia Eagles, and you guys do it so well over there at Locked On Eagles. You and Louie love listening to your show and checking in on all the teams around the NFL here on the network. So thanks for joining the program. And the first thing I have to ask you about before we can learn about the 2024 version of the Philadelphia Eagles, what the heck happened in 2023 with this team that was the one seed for a year and a half and then just really stumbled down the stretch in 2023?
I think you're asking that a little tongue-in-cheek, Mr. Peacock, knowing that your team killed the Philadelphia Eagles.
I wanted to hear you say it, okay? But there's some theories going on over in the fan base in San Francisco about why that happened to the Philadelphia Eagles last year.
It was quite the collapse.
It was right around 13, I feel like, when that collapse started to happen for the Eagles.
So I've used this reference on our show, and I think over at Bleacher Report as well. But one of my favorite movies, Billy Madison, there is a scene where one of his teachers reads him a book called The Puppy That Lost Its Way. That's really what the Philadelphia Eagles turned into. It was this juggernaut, this team that went on this impressive regular season run where Jalen Hurts is only losing 1 or 2 games over 2 calendar years. A defense that was just dominant. And then it fell off a cliff. It was like they stepped off the wrong ski lift, and all of a sudden they're going down a double black diamond into what would be one of the worst collapses in Eagles history and probably the NFL. When you look at, I think, the NFC East, which should have been locked up week 14 or 15, if you look at it, they allowed the Cowboys to get back into it, a team that had a lot of vets. Dak Prescott is a guy who's been in that situation. And the Eagles, who they lost a lot of leadership from 2022 to 2023, they saw it in front of their eyes what happens when they don't have the depth, they don't have the leadership, they can't stop the pass, and their offense can't pass the ball. Football is a very simple sport when you look at it, and the Eagles failed in the most basic of ways. They turned the ball over, they couldn't run the football, they couldn't take the football away, and it started in San Francisco. After I tweeted the Oklahoma State shaky hands gift of Brock Purdy, which went 3 million views on Twitter because I ate my words within a minute and a half because they come back, and that team showed you why they were in that position. And I think 2022 to 2023 was a year where Howie Roseman got caught up in his old ways. His 2017, let's sit on our hands. Let's see if we can do it again. We're not going to go out and overbid on some of these free agents. Let's see if we got these guys in-house. And what happens? 2018, 2019, 2020, 2023 is now there in the equation. And it all stemmed from that San Francisco game. They were broken. There was a moment in that game, and Lou and I had applauded Jalen Hurts for years that his body language is probably his most impressive asset, that when even the ship is about to overflow and everybody is man overboard, he's calm, cool, and collective. There was a point in that game where he got hit and he looks over to the sideline and he kind of shrugged his shoulders And I knew at that moment, I'm like, this team is dead. When your leader, the guy when William Wallace and Braveheart falls, nobody is going to be there to support the rest of Scotland, right? There was nobody there to back Jalen Hurts when even your leader couldn't take them to where you thought. And Jalen Hurts was the reason you got to the Super Bowl and the reason you almost beat Patrick Mahomes. So to see him realize that team was not where they were supposed to be, and I think they realized that there's a different echelon in 2023 to those teams. San Francisco was up there, obviously Kansas City. They went on this great stretch where they competed with a lot of those teams the year before, but then you go down this stretch and, man, it was evident two teams played in 2023. One in the start, one in the second half. And Tampa Bay in that playoff game, that was the culmination of it all.
It's funny you brought up the playoff game and body language. I thought the body language of the Eagles in that playoff game was horrific.
They didn't want to be there, Matt. It was evident from the moment they stepped on the field. Yes.
Right. They were the better team talent-wise. They should have went down there, take care of business, right the ship, and they wanted nothing to do with it. It looked like they were thinking about their golf plans, all those type of things. And, Peacock will like this, but the Niners can dig up things that you're bad at and show the rest of the league. And, that they, life after Niner games is not good for anyone. Usually it's not this bad. But I saw things like inability to pick up blitzes, back seven just being exposed over and over, the front four not making up for it on defense. And it was, pretty evident for the world to see.
When you got guys like Hassan Riddick and they're out there and it looks like they want no part of the game, and guys that were your veteran leaders that in the fourth quarter they stepped up. I mean, outside of, I would say, Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelsey, who really left it all on the field, I felt bad for those guys. I was saying the motivating force for that playoff game, Matt, should have been play for those guys. Nothing's going right, but know that these guys, they might never play with you again, and they've given everything. And that's what I think how we realized so quickly after that Tampa game. There's a picture of Jeffrey Lurie sitting in the owner's box, and it looks like he just saw somebody kick his dog. He went into that NovaCare complex the next day, and you saw the transformation from 2023 to 2024 in the blink of an eye. And they, like you said, Matt, San Francisco can dig up your weaknesses, especially when you don't have depth, especially when you lose guys like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson on the back end that are so integral in picking the ball off and helping you in field position battles. When they take those away, the Eagles didn't have that second and third pitch. They were a fastball pitcher, and they were getting taken yard time after time after time after time.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned how quickly things change there, and sometimes you have an idea about a team, but you can really believe them when they tell you what's going on. To me, watching that team, it's one thing to give the rest of the league a blueprint, but it was just a confidence problem after that as well for the Eagles. So I think it compounded everything. But when the season ended, what did they do? First, they got rid of coordinators and started over. So they're telling us they thought they were poorly coordinated on both sides of the ball. A couple of angles to this. One, we got to ask you what the new coordinators you expect them to bring and what's different about some famous names in Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio now coordinating the offense and the defense. But does that mean the head coach is on the hot seat coming into this year as well? And Nick Sirianni, if he can't figure out the rest of his coaching staff, because you wouldn't expect the team to fall off that much in coaching if there's stability at the head coach position.
That's such an intriguing point, especially now that we move into this world of Kellen Moore, where Jalen Hurts just the other day said that 95% of the stuff that they were doing in OTAs. And of course, you want to install a lot of the new stuff so they have more time to grasp these newer concepts. But he said 95% of what they were doing was Kellen Moore's offense.
Yeah. And new, right?
I've said it to Lou on our show, and Lou is probably the biggest proponent. Nick Sirianni, what do you do here? Like, what is his? No, I'm not trying to.
Right. No, I hear you. Right.
He's a Western New York guy. I respect the heck out of him. Like, he took us to the Super Bowl, but like, if you're going to fall off in 2-minute situations and not understand when to call timeouts properly and not having just a 30,000 foot overview and everything dialed up when you're not play calling and you're not the defensive coordinator, seriously, what do you do? Like, what was his job last year? And now moving into this year, what's the best case scenario for this team, if Kellen Moore brings them to a Super Bowl, he's going to get hired away. And then you're back in the worst case scenario. And we're back to the whole Brian Johnson, do you raise your quarterback coach up? And it's just a weird place to be. And Nick Sirianni, if I would zoom out on him for a second, he has to make sure this team is ready to go each and every week, because that last half of the season, I think that was just a black X on his name. One of those things that it's really going to sour on a lot of people if they go 1-3 to start off.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. Like, Nick, can you get this team ready?
Right.
And if not you, we're going to get somebody else, because we just signed all of these guys through 2029. This roster isn't going anywhere. It has to start with the head coach.
If you're not coordinating either side of the ball, just hire Big Dom as the head coach and let Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio do their thing.
He can't get kicked off the sidelines. He's got an official title this time.
That's true. Okay, I want to talk about what Fangio especially is going to bring to the defensive side of the ball for the Philadelphia Eagles, and some of the new faces there in Philly, and how it'll help them win the NFC East in 2024. More with Gino Cammilleri of Locked On Eagles next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Summertime means baseball. NBA Finals are nearly over. It's heading in that direction now, and you can bet on all of it at FanDuel. And look, there's baseball, NBA drafts as well, WNBA, but of course, this is a football podcast, and there are endless ways to bet on the 2024 football season, including Philadelphia Eagles to win it all at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 extra bucks to bet on everything from Finals MVP to who's going to win the World Series, who is going to hit one out of the park, and of course, offensive, defensive, rookies of the year. A couple good options in Philly there as well. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and win big. Add that big win to your summer bucket list. That is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Gino, kind of tease some of the rookies. I definitely want to talk about what's going on in the defensive secondary there with the Philadelphia Eagles. So real quick, and we'll close the book on Kellen Moore first and then talk Vic Fangio. Just scheme-wise, what is different about this 2024 team offensively and defensively?
I think there's going to be one major change for this offense. And if you look at personnel, it's going to be relatively the same outside of a major name at running back and a new face at center. But besides that, what Kellen Moore is going to do is bring motion to this offense. Motion is the lotion for this offense. It was something that this team was lacking in the worst of ways. If you look at any statistics of Brian Johnson, he was at the bottom in using motion for the Philadelphia Eagles. And that's a downright crime. When you have guys like A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and heck, even Dallas Goedert and what DeAndre Swift was last year, how can you not use motion just to get those guys? I mean, Brian, you know it better than anybody being in San Francisco. How great, I say it to Lou all the time, like how great is it when Deebo Samuel goes up and he can 50-50 ball somebody and like he mosses with somebody, and it's awesome. It's like, oh, that's a great football play. But at the same time, how great is it when the defense is looking around, Deebo gets it in a big chunk of space and he could get up on a ramp and just take off. Like that's also cool. The NFL doesn't have to put you in a vacuum where it's only man on man and you have to win your one-on-ones. That's what the Eagles offense was. If you shut down the one-on-ones, you won. They weren't going to get free releases. They weren't just going to put the ball into the hands of one of their wide receivers. They were terrible at running wide receiver screens. They could not create any yardage from that area. The tight end screen, which was arguably their best play under Nick Sirianni in 2021 and 2022, was non-existent in 2023. Kellen Moore in Dallas, in LA, all he did was move guys around the offensive formation. And if anything, it's just going to bring a dose of freshness to this offense. And you're not just going to line up two guys on each side. You're going 2 by 2. You can basically see that these guys are going to run mirrored, daggered routes. No, that's not going to happen anymore. You could call the Eagles plays last year. I don't think that's going to be able to happen this year under Kellen Moore.
So let's get the defense in a minute, but how you went outside his norm with the Barkley signing. I mean, there has to be a plan in place there. Is he going to catch 80 balls this year? Is the tush push going away? Fantasy owners need to know.
So the conversation with Saquon Barkley, you have to take away title. You have to take away running back. When we were looking at what the Eagles needed in this offense going into 2024 over at Locked On Eagles, we said they needed a fourth pass catcher.
Okay.
And whether
any
that's
way, shape, or form. Yeah.
Any way, shape, or form. Is that tight end 2? You get back to the Ertz-Goddard connection that ran 2018 and 2019. Is it bringing in a high-profile wide receiver number 3? Well, the Eagles looked at it and said, we can capitalize on this market inefficiency, paying Saquon Barkley a little over $12 million a year. Which, by the way, we have a joke over at our show. That's Darnell Mooney money now.
No, that's like Gabe Davis money.
That's
right.
Gabe Davis.
Right. Yeah.
Like the thing that we always go back to the year that the NBA got that new TV deal and guys like Matthew Dellavedova were signing for $70 million guaranteed. And it's like, if you're going to pay the 68th best wide receiver the same money as you could pay the number 1 running back, you pay him regardless of position. Market inefficiency is what Howie Roseman does best. And yeah, Matt, I think you hammer him the football, whether it's in the air, whether it's on the ground. These guys don't last in today's league. He's got a 3-year deal. That's probably what they're going to get out of him. So you just do exactly what the Giants did with him and make him a huge part of your offense, which is only going to benefit AJ, which is only going to benefit Dallas and Devontae. And it's just going to be a nice ebb and flow that they now have a guy who isn't just a one-dimensional back. DeAndre Swift, I thought he could have brought more to the passing game last year, probably some to do with Brian Johnson and his ability to scheme up that offense. But now with Saquon, you can line him up anywhere. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see him as a slot receiver at time or in 2-back sets with a guy like Kenneth Gainwell. Kellen Moore is only going to be a big proponent of having all of these guys. And if Kellen Moore doesn't succeed, man, he's going to be on the hottest seat in NovaCare. That's for sure.
Yeah, get Saquon in space. That's the argument I've had on Locked On 49ers about Christian McCaffrey. He's like, okay, running back's one thing, but Kyle Shanahan offenses run the ball. They have with every running back before McCaffrey, and they will after McCaffrey. But what if McCaffrey's the wide back? You're paying him $10 million less per year than Deebo Samuel if you move on from Deebo after this year, and now market inefficiencies. What you're paying this running back, he's actually your wide receiver 2, really, and then limit some of his carries, and Saquon's had some injuries in his career. Let's let another running back hammer his head into a brick wall. Get him the ball in space, throw the football to this stinking guy. I think that's the way to go about things for the, move him around. Don't let the defenses know where these guys are going to be. And positionless football is definitely the direction the entire league is going.
More efficiency,
right. A guy like Saquon absolutely allows you to do some of those things. So I can't wait. You mentioned center and a new face there. Is Cam Jurgens finally just going to jump in there? He's kind of been the heir apparent. What's that offensive line going to look like? Always been a strength, still adding to that line now post Kelsey era.
So I think we'll get the big 3 right out of the way. Jordan Mailata at left tackle. He's not going anywhere. You got Landon Dickerson. Hats off to him. Had a terrible career when it came to injuries in college. He's been healthy and he gets a bag at that guard position. I think he's going to be, if he stays on this trajectory, surefire Eagles Hall of Famer, if not a gold jacket recipient. And then Lane Johnson, we know he's getting a gold jacket. So what happens when Jason Kelce leaves? Well, the guy that Jason Kelce quite literally scouted himself, he was part of that whole evaluation process, and Howie Roseman gave him a project and said, who most mirrors your game? And it turned out to be Cam Jurgens. He was on the field next to him playing right guard last year, which is probably the best thing for him. And I think the Eagles have used that now with Quinyon Mitchell being behind a guy like Darius Slay. Let's see if we can get these older vets to kind of bring in this new generation. And Jason Kelce is signed off on him and Jeff Stoutland, and they said he knows this offense as well as anybody. It's going to be him and then probably Tyler Steen at right guard, even though they did bring in Matt Hennessy, former Falcon. Injury history, we'll see if he is more of your primary backup there. They also signed Max Sharping. We'll see if he gives a run there at right guard. But Tyler Steen, he's been a personal favorite of Jeff Stoutland. He brings a lot of power at the point of attack. He's a guy that you can run that run game through on that right side. When he was playing next to Lane Johnson at times last year, they didn't shy away from going that direction. So it's getting younger, but I think they have the best position coach in football in Jeff Stoutland. And if anybody signs off on an offensive lineman, and I got to take his advice for it, man, he's put some legends out there. That's a fact.
A degree
Super
from
quick.
Stoutland University is more valuable than Harvard or Yale at this point.
I would 100% look at who's making the money. Those guys at Stoutland U, that's for sure.
And that's where I was going to go with this. Maybe I'm insane, but the fact that Mekhi Becton got to go to Stoutland U.
Forgot to mention him.
I mean, the talent is overwhelming. I mean, maybe that ship sailed, but if anyone's going to revive his career, maybe he even kicks into guard. Like, just don't forget about that guy is all I'm saying.
No, they've actually been playing him at guard in OTAs, Matt. And Jeff said that he has the athletic ability in his body to play both positions. Rare. And if I'm an offensive lineman and my agent calls and says the Philadelphia Eagles would like to sign you for a year, I am inking that paper regardless of what the number is, because I know the following year I'm going to make a bag. Yeah. Look at guys like Halapuli Vadi Vaitai and what the Detroit Lions paid him after he won a Super Bowl, or guys like Isaac Sayamalu right now, who might be one of the best linemen in Pittsburgh. Yeah. Jeff Stoutland is great at his job.
We used to call them Munchak millionaires when Munchak was the Steelers O-line coach. Same thing. You take Chris Hubbard or BJ Finney and turn them into starters, and then they're a millionaire somewhere else, you know?
I'm telling you, just fire Sirianni, Big Dom, Jeff Stoutland, and you're set there with the coaching.
Big people beat up little people. That's a Chip Kelly idiom.
That is, yeah. All right. Gino, you cool to stick around a little bit longer? We got to talk about the defensive side of the ball.
Oh, we have to. Absolutely.
All right. More with Gino Cammilleri coming up next. What's going on defense? A couple of young defensive backs, I will put it, because I think one of them is not going to play as much cornerback potentially, or at least outside corner in Philly there. And predictions for the NFC East to finish it up with the 2024 Philadelphia Eagles next. Just want to say thanks once again. You guys can find Gino Cammilleri at GC24_football on Twitter. And of course, every day with Louis DiBiase doing Locked On Eagles. Fantastic talking with you today, Gino. Appreciate you. All right. Vic Fangio, what's he going to bring to the defensive side of the football? How much different is this defense going to look than the 2023 version?
So the Eagles tried to go the Vic Fangio route last year in signing Sean Desai to call their defense, and he was somebody who had been under Fangio, and we know that experiment didn't go well. Vic Fangio probably should have been the Eagles coordinator last year if somebody down in Arizona that happens to be their head coach didn't get a little weaselly and do some things behind the scenes that we won't get into. But Vic Fangio is back in Philadelphia, and what he is going to bring is the birth of cover six. You can be a prophet of the cover six defense, but you're not the guy who basically invented it and made it great in today's NFL. And yes, there were some things said from some defensive backs down in Miami about not putting the guys in the best position to succeed. But in this,
wasn't he mean to them too, or yelled at them or something? They did.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what it was, but Vic is a Philly guy. You'll be down at Citizens Bank Park watching the Phils on a Tuesday night after practice this summer. That's who he is, and he's old school. And guys like Jalen Carter, though, and Jordan Davis, it seems that they've responded well to him, and they needed that leadership. Fletcher Cox isn't there anymore. James Bradbury is a shell of himself. He probably won't even play a lot. He probably won't even be on the roster, if we're being honest. Darius Slay is only a couple years away from being retired. They needed somebody that could be this firm presence in there, in my opinion. And you went young and new in Sean Desai last year. You went foundational. We're going to go cover six. We're going to play a lot of chess on the back end. These guys are going to be defensive backs. Darius Slay is truly your only cornerback, in my opinion. And the rest of the guys are going to have the freedom to play all over the formation. And up front, they're going to have the freedom with Jalen Carter and those pass rushers to go and get the quarterback. But on the back end, hopefully it's more frustrating for quarterbacks to play against the Eagles, because it was pretty simple the last couple of years. Find your spot, hit the target, you're going to get big gains. Now with Vic Fangio, you're hoping that you put Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell and Sidney Brown, who should come back from his ACL injury, and Reed Blankenship. Put those guys in a position to make plays on the ball and set your $100 million offense up with great field position and get back to what won you games in 2022. And that ultimately was your defense.
So, Gino, I think everyone's excited about the young secondary, and there's a lot of promise there. But to me, the names you mentioned are the Georgia first-round defensive tackles, Davis and Carter. I think Carter could be the best defensive tackle in the league. I don't think Davis has that kind of ceiling. But to me, they have to be the straws that stir the drink.
And especially when you look at the front that Fangio plays, right? It's not like the Jim Schwartz. We got 4 guys, hand in the dirt. We're not going to move off the line, but we're still going to get upfield. It's going to be a lot less guys with their hand in the dirt and a lot more freedom on the back end. So if you're Jalen Carter and you're Jordan Davis, you have to do your job and then some. And maybe the biggest question mark of this entire defense is Jordan Davis, because you lose Fletcher Cox. You have guys like Milton Williams, who are probably one of the most underrated players at that position. If Jordan Davis is only a 2-down player and they find somebody else to rush the passer, you might find his ceiling this year to only be that type of player, that like Snacks Harrison 2-down defender. But if he does take that next step, man, you already have Jalen Carter, who's a legitimate top 3 interior defensive lineman all day long. And then you add a unicorn in Jordan Davis next to him with hopefully a rejuvenated pass rush, bringing in Bryce Huff, a second year, and Nolan Smith, contract year for Josh Sweat, last year for BG. That defensive line, if we're being honest, I know the secondary caught a lot of slack for allowing these crazy games in 2023, especially in the back half. But there is a reason that Hassan Riddick is no longer a Philadelphia Eagle. They were not pleased with that position. They were not pleased with what that defensive line does. Because what is the bread and butter of Philadelphia? Going back to what I was raised on, Jim Johnson, you're not running the ball against us. You're not pushing us on the line of scrimmage. And the Eagles got bullied on the line of scrimmage. And you're talking about 2 guys on the interior that won national championships for Georgia. That shouldn't happen. And that can't happen moving forward, or the destruction of the defensive line is going to put the secondary in a very bad position. And it has to be an even ebb and flow between them both. Because in Philadelphia, the last couple years, it's either one does their job, the other doesn't. And then it just eventually is going to crack. There's no defense that can win with just one or the other. It just doesn't happen.
You mentioned CJ Gardner-Johnson back, and if I'm not mistaken, James Bradbury is now getting looks at safety. Is that right? I
think more out of necessity. He didn't show up to the first day of mandatory mini camp because he had a charity event, which to me seems a little fishy why you would plan it the same day. And then he suffered an injury in his first snaps at safety. I don't think he's long for Philadelphia.
Yeah, so he might be a free agent at some point.
I think Debo was onto something.
Yeah,
I'll just say that.
Yeah. So obviously, and the Eagles, again, believe that what the team shows you more than what they tell you. And they drafted back-to-back corners early in the draft. Quinyon Mitchell, more of the outside type of a corner. Interested to see if he earns a starting job as a rookie. Then Cooper DeJean fell into the second round, shocked a lot of people, but I think it's because of what on tape looked like a guy who might not be that outside man corner, maybe more of his own guy, maybe better inside. He can hit you, he can tackle, a nickel, maybe a safety. How are these young corners going to line up in that secondary? Is DeJean a safety? Is he a nickel? What is he?
They've really been playing him everywhere. And personally, when I was scouting him, I had him as a safety because of what I believe he can be. And they're like, oh, white corner. That's why you're saying that. No. I think he legitimately has elite level ball skills, elite level football IQ, and you let him play with his eyes to a quarterback. Man, that's a type of player that I can see Quinyon Mitchell being your shutdown on the field side. Let him take away the number one. Let DeJean on the back end just rove that quarter side of the field or that half side of the field. And now you got range with CGJ and Sidney Brown and guys that can run a little bit on the back end. I think they hit a home run. Like, positionless players fall in the draft for a reason that makes no sense in my opinion.
Yeah.
If the guy
Brian
can play
Branch
football,
last year,
the guy can play football and he can get turnovers, and he can tackle, and he's smart, and he's a good guy, and he can dunk a basketball better than most guys on the team. Why is he falling to the NFL? To me, just needs to draft good players. I don't know why Cooper DeJean fell to the second round, and frankly, it makes no sense. And same with Nolan Smith last year. Like, these guys might not have a position, but they're good football players.
It's strange. The NFL values the slot and the nickel so much, but then sometimes like, oh, he's not an outside man corner, so we don't like him anymore. It's like, that's all the league does these days.
Mm-hmm.
Is target the middle of the field. And so why would you not want a great slot receiver on offense, whether it's a tight end or a wide receiver or a running back or whatever it is? And why would you not want good interior defenders on the defensive side of the ball to match up with those guys?
Yeah, Justin Jefferson just got paid, what, $35 million, and he's playing some snaps at the slot position, and the nickel is going to have to guard him, and the Eagles didn't have that when they lost CGJ. Now they have another guy like that, and the last thing I want to talk about is how are they going to line up? Man, it's going to be a chessboard. It's truly going to be any way Vic Fangio wants to put these guys out there. I think there's one guy that has his position solidified, Darius Slay. He's going to cover the number one until he retires, as he should. He was only playing at 30% on one of his knees, he said last year, and he was still playing exceptional football. And then Quinyon Mitchell, he's taking snaps in the slot on the boundary as well. They've lined up in 4-5 defensive back sets. How they're going to keep the best 12 players on the back end, I don't know if it's going to be 8 cornerbacks and 4 safeties. It just has to be the best 12 defensive backs.
Eagles win the NFC East, Gino?
Well, last time I said that, Locked On Cowboys took me for a ride and clipped that pretty good. But if they don't, there's some big question marks that we have to ask. Like, there are legitimate foundational questions at that point if they don't win the NFC East. And Jerry said they went all in. And, I mean, if Royce Freeman is all in to you, then I guess that's your best push at winning the NFC East. I think Washington should be better with a lot of the veterans that they brought in. The Giants are the Giants, we'll see. But with the Eagles' schedule, I think the schedule helps them the most. Not playing that first place schedule. You have that second place schedule. You're going against the AFC North. It will be a little bit tougher, but all in all, the games against the NFC South, I think they're going to probably go 3-1 against that. Hopefully, you can't lose to Tampa again. That would be an absolute nightmare. But it's all good to talk optimistic until they kick you in the face against the San Francisco 49ers and your team dies in front of your eyes. But I don't think the 2024 Eagles fall victim to that. I legitimately think they have righted their wrongs, and they're in a better place than they were 6 months ago.
AFC North's no joke, though, Gino. I'm just telling you.
I think it's going to be good football for them because it mirrors the NFC East. You got games physical, where it could be physical or it could be an absolute shootout. But you know one thing, those teams in both of those divisions, I think maybe better than anybody draft to beat their division.
Oh,
the AFC North, those teams are just copycats of each other.
Oh, yeah.
And same with the NFC East. It's like the Eagles and Dallas have kind of been cut from the same cloth for the last 15 years. It's just who got the better season, essentially. And here we are again. Can the Eagles one up the Cowboys and once again prove 20 some odd years in a row without a consecutive NFC East divisional winner, which seems downright insane if you put it statistically.
Hey, and by the way, an underrated aspect of the Vic Fangio hire for the Eagles, if you're trying to take down the 49ers to win the NFC, is Fangio was a consultant with the Niners a couple years ago. And a lot of people thought that Fangio was going to replace DeMeco Ryans as defensive coordinator of the 49ers. He actually went to Miami and then got a lot of insight, I'm sure, from Mike McDaniels. And so kind of in the mind of that Shanahan tree offense, how they do things. So, you know, not only can help out what the Eagles currently are doing on offense and, you know, maybe let Sirianni and Moore know about why things are happening the way they are in two teams that, by the way, run the most motion, but also his insights into how to beat those offenses. So it's an interesting angle that I think probably had maybe a little bit extra. And I'm sure there was a lot to why they hired Fangio, but, you know, added bonus there.
It's a great point. And if it's the right hire, I think Vic Fangio should be your defensive coordinator for 5 years, hopefully. Like, I want him to be the Eagles' Steve Spagnuolo. I want him to be what Spags is to Andy Reid, to whoever the head coach is, if it is Nick Sirianni who writes this ship, because it's either going to be him or whatever offensive coordinator gets this thing going. And they're like, all right, this guy's going to be our head coach. And I think that might be a legitimate discussion we have after this year if Kellen Moore goes out there and absolutely crushes it, which fingers crossed for all Eagles fans. I hope that is what happens.
Appreciate the time, Gino. We took you longer than we planned to, but so much great insight on those Philadelphia Eagles in 2024. Make sure you are listening to Locked On Eagles every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network with Gino and Louie doing it up at GC24_football on Twitter. A must follow Gino Cammilleri. Thanks, Gino. Appreciate the time, man.
Appreciate you guys. Always love talking Locked On, and we're about to hit our 1400th episode together as a duo over at Locked On Eagles in a couple weeks. And it seems surreal, but we've all been doing it just as long as each other, man. It's a great network, and that's why Peacock and Williamson has been cruising along. And keep subscribing to all the shows.
Absolutely. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube and wherever you are listening to this podcast. Matt and I back tomorrow. Peacock and Williamson.